3 United States Air Force security patrolmen are walking into a British pine forest in the middle of the night. They are not on a training exercise. They are not drunk. They have already radioed their commanding officer, and he told them to investigate. What happened next, over the following 3 nights, would become the most documented and most disputed UFO incident in British history. In 1980, the twin bases of RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge in Suffolk were among the most strategically important NATO air bases in Western Europe. Operated by the United States Air Force under NATO arrangements, the bases house the 881st Tactical Fighter Wing and, according to persistent but classified reports, potentially stored nuclear weapons on British soil. Between these 2 bases lay Rendlesham Forest, a Forestry Commission woodland that served effectively as the back fence of the installation. The forest sat just east of RAF Woodbridge's perimeter fence. It was not a secured area. Anyone or anything could enter it from the eastern side, where the trees ran toward the North Sea coast. The men who first walked into that forest in the early hours of December 26, 1980, were not civilians. They were trained, armed USAF security police, the personnel responsible for protecting one of America's most sensitive military assets in Europe. Staff Sergeant Jim Penniston was 25 years old. He had served in the Air Force for 6 years and was considered an experienced, reliable NCO. On the night of December 25th, he was on duty as a security supervisor at RAF Woodbridge. Airman First Class John Burroughs was 19. He was newer to the base, newer to the Air Force, assigned to the East Gate, the gate closest to the forest. He is the one who first reported the lights. And then there was Airman Edward Cabansag, also assigned as security that night. Quieter, less well-known in the later record, but present and a co-signer of the initial incident report. These were not men inclined toward fantasy. Their jobs depended on clear observation and accurate reporting. And on the night of December 25, 1980, at approximately 3 a.m., they reported colored lights descending into Rendlesham Forest. Burroughs and another airman first spotted the lights from the East Gate. The initial report described bright colored lights, red, blue, white, descending into the tree line beyond the fence. Permission was given to investigate. Penniston, Burroughs, and Cabansag crossed the fence and entered the forest on foot. As they moved deeper into the trees, their radio communications began to degrade. The official written reports would later note this as unexplained interference, though skeptics would point out that the dense pine canopy and low-lying terrain could produce similar effects. What Penniston says he encountered next is the heart of the Rendlesham case. He would later state that he approached a craft to within arm's reach, a triangular metallic object, roughly 3 meters in height, bearing strange markings on its surface, and that he touched it. That same night, or shortly after, Penniston recorded observations in a notebook. The sketches he drew show a craft with geometric symbols he compared to a written language. By the time the men returned to base, it was nearly dawn. No formal alert had been raised on base. No aircraft had been scrambled. The initial official response was, essentially, write it up and go to bed. The following morning, military personnel returned to the site. What they found and documented constitutes the physical evidence record that skeptics and believers have been arguing over ever since. 3 indentations in the ground, arranged in a triangular pattern, were measured and photographed. The indentations were approximately 1.5 inches deep and 7 inches in diameter. A triangular arrangement consistent with a 3-point landing configuration. The measurements were recorded, the location was documented, and a Geiger counter reading was taken, showing radiation levels that the supervising officer, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, would later describe as significantly above background. Above the indentations, branches of the pine trees overhead showed signs of damage, scorch marks and broken limbs, in a pattern directed downward toward the triangular formation on the ground. The radiation readings would become one of the most contested elements of the case. A government analysis, released years later under the Freedom of Information Act, suggested the readings were slightly above background, but not at levels indicating a genuine radiation hazard. The witnesses dispute this characterization to this day. The most compelling piece of evidence in the entire Rendlesham case was not produced by a private witness. It was produced by a senior United States Air Force officer on his own recording device, as the events happened. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt was the deputy base commander of RAF Bent Waters. He was, by any definition, a credible institutional witness. On the night of December 27th, he went into the forest himself, and he took a dictaphone. The recording, known as the Halt tape, runs for approximately 18 minutes. It is one of the most extraordinary documents in the history of unexplained phenomena, not because of what it claims, but because of who made it and how. Halt can be heard narrating his observations in real time, professional, measured, clearly trying to document accurately. He describes lights moving through the forest. He describes a beam descending toward the ground. And then, on the recording, you hear the composure of a senior military officer begin, very slightly, to crack, not into panic, not into theater, into something quieter and harder to dismiss, genuine, unguarded disorientation. On the tape, Halt describes a red, sun-like object moving through the forest, breaking into smaller white objects and then disappearing. He describes receiving a beam of light at his feet. He describes 3 separate objects overhead, moving in sharp, angular patterns no conventional aircraft could perform. The recording ends. The group returns to base. And unlike the first night, this time the deputy base commander himself has witnessed something he cannot account for. And the base's own equipment recorded his reaction to it. Live in the dark. On January 13, 1981, more than 2 weeks after the incidents, Lieutenant Colonel Halt filed an official memorandum to the British Ministry of Defense. The memo is 2 pages. It is written in the flat, precise language of a military report. It describes, in official documentation signed by a deputy base commander, a triangular craft, ground indentations, radiation readings, and a beam of light directed at the base. The British Ministry of Defense received the memo. Their response was, to put it charitably, underwhelming. A subsequent investigation concluded that the sightings were of no defense significance, which, as many researchers have since pointed out, is not the same as saying they did not happen. The memo itself remained classified for 11 years. It was released to the public in 1983 under a Freedom of Information request, and when it was, it became one of the most discussed official government documents in the history of UFO research. The most persistent skeptical explanation begins with Orfordness Lighthouse. Located roughly 5 miles east of the forest on the Suffolk coast, the lighthouse produces a rotating light beam visible from within the trees. And skeptics, including astronomer Ian Ridpath, have argued persuasively that the pulsing colored light the witnesses described matches the lighthouse's flash timing almost exactly. Ridpath's research also established that a bright fireball meteor was reported over southern England on the night of December 25th, the night of the first encounter. He proposes that this meteor, combined with the lighthouse beam, accounts for the colored lights the security patrol initially followed into the forest. The ground indentations? Skeptics argue they are consistent with rabbit diggings or animal activity, or alternatively with the impressions left by tripod equipment used by forestry workers. The radiation readings? Within a range that can be naturally occurring in local soil conditions, depending on whose analysis you accept. A further theory proposed by various researchers suggests a classified experimental aircraft or drone, potentially a secret NATO asset, may have made a forced or controlled landing in the forest that night. This would explain the extreme classification response, the official suppression, and the physical evidence, while attributing the event to a known category of human technology. Here is the problem with the lighthouse theory, and the reason it has never fully closed the case. Halt knew about the lighthouse. He worked on the base. His team included people who had served at RAF Woodbridge for months. When he filed his memo, he was not an impressionable tourist seeing a lighthouse for the first time. He was a professional who, by the time he wrote that document, had every reason to have already considered and discounted that explanation. And the Halt tape itself remains an obstacle to full dismissal. The lighthouse does not move through a forest. The lighthouse does not produce a beam that descends to the ground at the feet of a watching observer. And the lighthouse does not cause a trained senior military officer to quietly say, "Live," on tape, in the dark, "This is weird." After the incidents, the witnesses were not congratulated for their vigilance. They were not formally briefed. Several of the airmen involved later reported being told in no uncertain terms that the events they had witnessed had not occurred, and that they were not to discuss them. John Burroughs later stated that he was told the events had a conventional explanation, that he should not speak about them, and, most troublingly, that his medical records from the period appeared to have been classified. In 2015, after a years-long campaign, Burroughs received a settlement from the Veterans Administration acknowledging service-related injuries consistent with radiation exposure. The VA did not specify the source. Jim Penniston's account grew more complex over the years. He later introduced claims about a binary code he had received during the encounter and time travel elements, claims that many researchers considered damaging to his original, simpler testimony. Skeptics have used this evolution as grounds to discount his account entirely. When the Halt memo was released in 1983, the story exploded into the British press. The Ministry of Defense's position, no defense significance, held firm publicly. Privately, the picture is less clear. The British National Archives contain considerable documentation of internal MOD discussion about the case that runs for years after the official "nothing happened" conclusion. The RAF Woodbridge and Bentwaters bases were returned to British control in 1993 following the Cold War drawdown. The bases closed, the personnel scattered, and the witnesses, now civilians, now aging, now with nothing institutional to protect, kept talking. Rendlesham Forest now has a designated UFO trail. The site where the ground indentations were found is marked. Tourists walk it every year. The mundane absorption of a genuinely strange event into heritage tourism is, in its own way, one of the stranger things about this case. Halt has never recanted. In 2010, he signed a notarized affidavit restating his account and asserting that the events could not be explained by conventional means. He has also stated in multiple on-record interviews that he believes the U.S. and British governments know more about what happened than they have disclosed. Britain's UFO file, including Rendlesham-related material, were released in batches between 2008 and 2013 under a Ministry of Defense review. They reveal a bureaucracy that took the subject more seriously internally than it ever admitted publicly, while consistently failing to reach a conclusion about what had actually been observed. The lighthouse explanation remains the most academically defensible and the most demonstrably incomplete. It handles the light. It does not handle the tape. It does not handle the ground evidence, the radiation readings, or the VA settlement. A full explanation would need to account for all of these, and none of the theories on offer does. John Burroughs, who walked into that forest as a 19-year-old on his first serious posting, spent decades unable to obtain his own medical records from the Air Force. What those records contained, and what the VA's eventual settlement implies they demonstrated, has never been disclosed in detail. Here is what is not disputed. 3 trained military personnel entered this forest and filed an official incident report. A senior officer returned 2 nights later and made a contemporaneous audio recording. That recording documents 18 minutes of unexplained observation by a credible professional witness. An official government memorandum exists. Physical evidence was found and measured, and a veteran spent 35 years fighting to obtain his own classified medical records. What is disputed is everything else: the shape of the object, the nature of the lights, the meaning of the radiation readings, the source of the beam, the reason the records were sealed. And the reason, 44 years later, the men who were there still cannot fully agree on what they saw. John Burroughs' medical records from the weeks following his time in Rendlesham Forest were classified by the United States Air Force. They were held classified for over 30 years. When they were finally addressed through a VA settlement, the specific findings were not made public. We do not know what was in them. We do not know what they showed. That, more than any light in any forest, is the detail that should keep you up at night. All our research and sources for this case are linked in the description below.